Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks. Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Interdisciplinary and Trans-Disciplinary Studies, SOITS, Diploma Postgraduate Diploma Programs. Postgraduate Diploma in Migration and Diaspora, PGDMIDI. MDI 001 Migration and Diaspora, Theory and Methodology. Block-1 Core Concepts. Unit-1 Concepts of Migration and Diaspora. 1.1 Learning Objectives. After studying this unit, you should be able to times engage with the theories and discourses on migration and diaspora. Times read some of the most current scholarships on these two subjects. Times discusses the concepts of migration and diaspora in a theoretical framework. 1.2 Introduction. In this unit, we give an overview of what is international migration, what are the various theories to understand the concept and dynamics of international migration, and finally how does it relate to the formation of diaspora. In other words, this unit, apart from understanding migration, also discusses the interlinkages between migration and diaspora and the concept of diaspora. As we all know, migration is not a new phenomenon, rather it is as old as the human civilization itself. People used to migrate from one place to another, or from one continent to another even before the birth of nation-states. International migration relates to the movement of people across national borders. This phenomenon has not only gathered momentum in the modern world but has also become stabilized owing to transnational connectivity. The transnationalization of connections, networks, and identities lead to the formation of diasporas. Although it is difficult to come out with a specific definition, broadly speaking, the diasporas are long-term settlers who continue to have socio-cultural, economic, and sometimes political links with the homeland while at the same time being part of the socio-cultural, economic, and political lives of the host land. 1.3 International migration. Migration, in simple words, can be understood as a permanent or semi-permanent change of residence by an individual, family, or group. Migration is a broad term. We can even say that human history is the history of migration. Migration can be caused by various factors like better economic opportunities, better lifestyle, better educational opportunities, demographic imbalance, family reunification, natural calamities, climatic change, the spread of epidemics, wars, change in the national boundaries, genocide, religious and social ostracization, etc. The point which we are trying to make here is that people migrate due to different reasons and circumstances. Migration can also be of various types such as voluntary or involuntary, forced, internal or international, temporary or permanent, and regular or irregular migration. Demko, Ross and Schnell describe migration as the most complex component of population change. It provides an important network for the diffusion of ideas and information and indicates symptoms of social and economic change and can be regarded as a human adjustment to economic, environmental, and social problems. 1970, 286 to 287. Although migration has been happening since the beginning of human history, modern times have been termed as the age of migration, Castles and Miller. 1993, 2009, owing to an enormous increase in international migration. As per United Nations Population Division, international migrants have increased from 105 million in 1985 to 214 million in 2010. It is little more than 3% of the world population. This number, however, is not fully correct as a lot of people migrate illegally and are not documented. Also, the criteria for defining who is a migrant vary from country to country. In some cases, citizenship can convert the migrants into citizens, and in other cases, even the second generations can remain classified as non-citizens. Migration is an interdisciplinary subject, and each discipline tends to bring its own analysis according to its own academic needs. There has been an epistemological shift from quantitative understandings of population geography to the qualitative reading of anthropological interpretations. This understanding is not about the causes or the effects of migration but more about the understanding of the migrant experiences. According to Castles, migration is a part of the process of transformation of social structures and institutions and the entire global political economy. Castles further explains that migration studies needs to be embedded in broader social theory, drawing on the full repertoire of social science disciplines, and that migration embraces all dimensions of human experience and therefore demands an interdisciplinary approach. 2010, 1596. Sociologist Everett Lee observed that the factors which influence the decision of an emigrant can be divided as those operating in the area of origin, push factors, at the destination, pull factors. At the micro level, migration is the result of decisions made by an individual, the rational actors. International migration occurs when people cross state boundaries and stay in the host state for a minimum time. The International Organization of Migration (IOM) describes international migration as the movement of persons who leave their country of origin or the country of habitual residence to establish themselves either permanently or temporarily in another country. An international frontier is therefore crossed. 2004, 33. Some scholars like Fabio Baggio, 2016, have given a descriptive classification of migrants. For example, geographical classification, which includes transoceanic, transcontinental, border migrations, neighbor migration and regional migration, chronological classification, which includes migrants based on time period like the short-term and long-term, temporary or permanent migrations, demographic economic classification, which includes categories like individual, family, male-female, highly skilled, skilled migrants, etc., political and legal classification, which includes migrants under regular or illegal migrations, casual classification, which include free or forced migrations, Baggio 2016, 1-5. United Nations, UN, fixes to basic features of international migration, which are the international migrant stock and international migration flow. While the stock means a measure of the number of international migrants at a given point of time, flow means number of persons arriving in, inflows, or departing from, outflows, a given country or region over the course of a specified time period, usually a calendar year. UN asserts that both measures are necessary to assess migration trends and provide complementary insights for policy purposes. 2025. 1.4 Theories of International Migration. International migration studies have evolved over the years, and no single theory can explain the rise and spread of international migration. The phenomenon has been explained by various social scientists like sociologists, social anthropologists, demographers, economists, geographers, and by developing and applying their own tools and levels of analysis. Neoclassical theory. The theory of neoclassical economics explains international migration from A macro-level perspective of geographic differences in the supply and demand of labor, Todaro and Marusco, 1987, Marcy et al. 1998, 18, a country or a region which has a large presence of labor relative to the availability of capital will have excess supply of labor and low wages. On the other hand, a country or a region which has a large capital relative to the presence of labor will have labor scarcity and as a result high wages. As a consequence, the differential in wages induces the labor from labor surplus low-wage countries to move to labor-scarce high-wage countries. Neoclassical theory, therefore, implies that the labor market mechanisms are the direct and sole factors influencing the decision of the individual to migrate, and other factors do not have much of effect on international migration. International migration has been seen by Sazastad, 1962, as investment in human capital, which means that people move to places that provides them a better future prospects. Migration, on the other hand, comes at a cost. In order to earn higher wages, some investments must be made. The expense of travel, the cost of living while looking for work, the effort required to learn another language and adjusting to a different culture, and the psychological costs of leaving friends and family behind and meeting new people are all examples of such costs. Sazastad, 1962 in Marcy et al. 1998, 19. As a result, the theory assumes that pay and employment differentials across countries are the primary motivators for people to migrate. Migration will come to a halt once such disparities are eliminated. A rational person makes the decision to migrate, and the migration destination is chosen based on the projected cost-benefit analysis. Critics argue that this strategy just reduces migrants to labor force and ignores gender, ethnicity, and social class categorization. Cadwallader, 1992, 10, in Goss and Lindquist, 1995, 320. Furthermore, mobility barriers, such as political or structural barriers, are not considered. Goss and Lindquist, 1995, 320. The new economics of migration. The new economics of migration method emerged in the 1980s and has provided some new insights into the migration process. This integrated approach was created to connect different levels of social structure while also taking into account historical and contemporary activities. Fawcett and Arnold, 1987, 456. Marcy, 1990, in Goss and Lindquist, 1995, 326. Individual rationality and macroeconomic conditions are no longer considered as the sole factors influencing decision-making. Instead, the new migration economics highlights the significance of bigger groups of individuals, such as families, homes, or even communities, as the link between macro and micro-level analysis. The model posits that people's collective goals are to maximize expected income, while minimizing risks associated with all types of market failures, not only labor market failures. Economic improvement in sending nations may not mean the end of migration. On the contrary, it may increase the strain on migrants. A rise in the return on local productivity may make migration more appealing as a means of overcoming capital and risk restrictions, regardless of whether pay differentials exist or not. The model predicts that migration will persist if other, above-mentioned markets within the sending nations are imperfect, non-existent, or in disequilibrium. Furthermore, households in communities with varying income distributions may be motivated differently by the same predicted gain. The notion of a unitary strategic actor is a major point of contention for critics of This paradigm, it has been pointed out, particularly by feminists, that household members do not always share the same aims and priorities. Segmented labor market theory. The core idea of this economic theory is that international migration is a result of modern industrial societies' underlying labor demands. According to Pio, 1979, migration is caused by pull forces in the destination country rather than push factors in the source country. He claims that industrialized countries' economic arrangements are to blame for the constant desire for foreign employees. According to this hypothesis, the receiving country's labor market, as well as all employers and governments working on its behalf, is the primary driver of international migration. According to Pio, 1979, international migration is driven by demand, and pay disparities and inadequate insurance do not have a significant impact on migration. Historical structural theory and world systems theory. International migration, according to the theory, is a natural result of capitalist market creation in emerging countries, and the penetration of the global economy into peripheral regions serves as a stimulant for international movement. International migration, according to historical structuralism and world system theory, has little to do with income or employment differentials across countries, rather, it stems from the dynamics of market development and the global economy's political structure. Wallerstein 2004. 1. 5. The perpetuation of international migration. Social capital theory. According to this theory, migrant networks play a critical role in the perpetuation of international movement and serve as a sort of social capital that makes migration simpler for everyone. Those networks, according to Palloni et al., are interpersonal links that link migrants, former migrants, and non-migrants in origin and destination places through ties of family, kinship, friendship, and shared community of origin. Palloni et al. 2001. When people's relationships alter in ways that make it easier to act, social capital is said to be created. As a result, the benefits of migrating are limited due to everyday ties to family and community. When one user in a personal network migrates, however, this changes. These links are then turned into a resource that a potential migrant can use to acquire access to abroad work and lower the overall cost of relocation. Every act of migration generates social capital for all non-migrants, increasing their chances of migrating as a result. As a result, social networks in the nation of origin can develop into migrant networks that connect the home country with the host country, minimizing the costs of migration for a migrant in that network. For the first migrant who travels to a new nation without any social ties, migration is costly. Then, after chain migration has developed, migrant networks lower movement costs. According to this concept, international migration expands over time until network connections have spread broadly enough in a sending region that all people who want to travel can do so without difficulty. After that, migration slows. Furthermore, according to the hypothesis, the amount of a country's migratory movement is not directly tied to pay differentials or employment rates. The declining costs and dangers of travel resulting from the increase of migrant networks over time appear to outweigh these considerations. Furthermore, when international migration becomes more institutionalized through the establishment and elaboration of networks, it becomes less dependent on the circumstances that first triggered it. However, as networks grow larger, they may become more selective and competitive, which means that joining a migrant network does not guarantee that you will be able to migrate. Goss and Lindquist 1995. Cumulative causation. This hypothesis explains how migration starts and progresses. According to the model, international migration tends to sustain itself over time in ways that gradually raise the possibility of additional movement. Massey 1999, Fussell and Massey 2004. Causation is cumulative in the sense that each act of migration changes the social context in which subsequent migration decisions are made, usually in ways that increase the likelihood of further movement. Because the feedback mechanisms of cumulative causation are largely outside the reach of government, the social, economic, and cultural changes brought about by international migration in sending and receiving countries give the movement of people a powerful impetus resistant to easy control or regulation. The premise of this strategy is that the cumulative influence of individual decisions can alter the context in which a migration decision is made over time. The human agency approach in international labor migration. The scientific literature on labor migration, particularly in the Gulf countries, tends to see the phenomenon as purely structural, with human beings appearing only as stock or labor force. The push and pull elements of the economy or demographics are the major actors in these assessments. Politics, government, ideologies, and various types of markets are examples of central actors on the micro and macro levels. As a result, the social anthropological Longwa 1997 proposes a human agency perspective to international labor migration that stresses the person. The reasons why people choose to relocate, stay abroad, or return home demand their own inquiry and understanding. According to Longwa, 1997, and Suter, 2005, not only structural incentives and impediments account for these events, but also the definition of the limit beyond which deprivation becomes intolerable and thus necessitates drastic measures, such as migration, as well as the definition of what is good, or was, necessary, or impossible to put up within the host country, are decided by human beings who appraise their own circumstances and not by the abstract. 1.6 The concept of diaspora. As mentioned in the earlier section, diaspora is a concept that is closely related to international migration. Nevertheless, it is not a new concept. The term diaspora has a Greek origin, implying scattering or dispersion. The term first came in usage in the context of the Jewish. The Jewish experience remained the paradigm for a very long time and was marked by the destruction of Jerusalem and dispersion of Jews to other areas, especially Babylon, with a sense of captivity, exile, alienation, and isolation. It added a shade of victimization and negativity in the whole sense of the word. Pandey 2013. In the postmodern world, however, the concept was radically reordered in response to the growing transnationalism. Globalization and transnationalism has led to the technological revolution in telecommunications and information technology and has created conditions for increased cross-border communication and exchange and, therefore, laid the basis for an expansion of economic transactions among states on a global scale. Hall and Ben, 2024. For growing numbers of migrants, the significant contacts and emotional connections that occur across borders turn the identity into transnational. The economic engagements and formal citizenship practices that have evolved in recent decades make the transnational engagement more dynamic and substantial. Thus, The concept and the term diaspora have traveled far from their origin. William Safran made the first significant step in the direction of defining or conceptualizing the term diaspora. However, as each diasporic formation is different, Safran substantially relaxed his definition by stating that no contemporary diaspora will meet all the criteria but will share several of the following features. See the box. Cohen, 1995, adopts Safran's definition but added 4 additional features. Diaspora should also include scattering groups with aggressive or voluntary purposes, should poses a strong with the past that acts as a block to assimilation. Diasporas should be defined positively rather than negatively. People of the diaspora have also a common identity with co-ethnic members in other countries such as colonial settlers, overseas students, refugees, and economic migrants. Cohen also divides the diaspora studies into 4 following phases. The first phase, the classical use of the term, relates to the study of the Jewish experience. The second phase, from 1970 to the 80s, when the classical meaning was extended to common Africans, Armenians, and the Irish. The third phase, from the mid-1990s, was marked by new ways of studying diasporas by doing away with the social constructivist demarcation of the diasporic idea into homeland and ethnic religious community. The fourth phase, of consolidation, is marked by a modified reaffirmation of the diasporic idea, including its core elements, common features, and ideal types. According to Adamson, 2007, a diaspora can be identified as a social collectivity that exists across state borders and has succeeded over time to sustain a collective national, cultural, or religious identity through a sense of internal cohesion and sustain ties with a real or imagined homeland, and 2. Display an ability to address the common interests of members of the social collective through a developed internal organizational framework and transnational links. 2007, 497. Different types of diasporas. Cohen identifies 5 types of diasporas. 1. Victim refugee Jewish, African, Armenian, Irish, and Palestinian. 2. Imperial colonial ancient Greek, British, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch. 3. Labor service indentures Indian, Chinese, Japanese, Italian, Turk. 4. Trade business professional Lebanese, Chinese, some Indian communities. 5. Cultural hybrid postmodern Caribbean and today's Chinese and Indian. Though the meaning and form of diaspora is changing over time, there is no clear-cut distinction for many diasporas, as the same diaspora broadly can come under different categories. For example, some of the Indian diasporas can be traders, professionals, and labor. The same is with the Chinese diasporas. In 2004, Michel Reyes also came out with his explanation of diaspora formation through phases. He describes 3 critical historical phases: the classical period with ancient Greek, Jewish, and Armenian diasporas; 2. Modern period, which relates to the historical fact of slavery and colonization. This phase can be further divided into 3 phases. A. The expansion of European capital, 1500. 1814. B. The Industrial Revolution, 1815 to 1914. And C. The interwar period, 1914 to 1945. 3. The third phase is the contemporary or late modern period of immediately after World War II to the present day. This phase is most important for understanding the modern diasporas. 2004, 44 to 49. Safran is criticized by James Clifford, 1994. He claims that the Jewish diaspora lacks his last three characteristics. Diasporas, he believes, should have boundaries. They should be defined in light of national state norms and tribal people's indigenous claims. Brubaker addresses the term diaspora's expansion, as well as the dispersion of its connotations in semantic, conceptual, and disciplinary space. Brubaker, 2005, according to him, there should be criteria for defining diaspora to avoid becoming confused in the flowering of diasporas. These characteristics include dispersion, homeland orientation, and border maintenance. Lastly, according to A. Pandey, 2013, the core elements that can be treated as the starting point for the description of the diaspora can be underlined as the following. 1. Cross-border migration, dispersion, and settlement. It implies a dispersion in which the territorial boundaries of the state are crossed, followed by settlement in the new land. This cross-border movement should lead to a permanent or, at least, long-term settlement in the host country. 2. Host land participation. Settlement in the new land signifies not only residence but participation in the economic and political processes of the host land. 3. Homeland consciousness. It implies a sense of awareness about the existence of a motherland, sometimes a non-existent one, or a profound engagement with the homeland which exists beyond the borders of the country of settlement. 4. Construction of a multilocational self. It involves the recreation of identity, drawing from both home and host lands, and is not marked by strict boundaries. Such an identity is distinct, yet has points of the merger at both ends, and undergoes changes as generations pass by. Both host land homeland dynamics play a crucial role in the formation of such identities. In contemporary times, the diasporic formations are complex, and the reason for their formation is manifold. Diasporic identities have become deterritorialized. Michel Lager, 1999, 641, remarked that the nation has outgrown the state because of its diasporic tentacles. Diasporic identities are constructed and deconstructed in a flexible and situational way. Hence, defining the term or coming out with an ideal type is often confronted with the problem of applicability. To treat diasporas as a homogeneous term would be unfair, as each case is markedly different from the other. Pandey, 2013. However, what needs to be highlighted here is that every act of migration does not necessarily lead to diasporic formation. Cohen, 1995, 516, has highlighted that time has to pass before the migrant community can be called a diaspora. Safran's main characteristics of a diaspora: A. They, or their ancestors, have been dispersed from an original center to two or more foreign regions. B. They retain a collective memory, vision or myth about their original homeland, including its location, history, and achievements. C. They believe they are not, and perhaps can never be, fully accepted in their host societies and so remain partly separate. D. Their ancestral home is idealized and it is thought that, when conditions are favorable, either they or their descendants should return. E. They believe all members of the diaspora should be committed to the maintenance or restoration of the original homeland and its safety and prosperity. And F. They continue in various ways to relate to that homeland, and their ethno-communal consciousness and solidarity are in an important way defined by the existence of such a relationship. 1.7 Summary. If there is no migration, there is no question of the formation of diaspora. However, Not all migrant communities can be termed as diaspora. As various theories mention, it is the permanent or settled migration in another country, having social, cultural, emotional links with the mother country that qualifies a community as a diaspora. However, there are also various types, diversities, and complexities in the formation of diaspora as well as their relationships with home and host countries. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates and